All right, so we have been keeping up with the ongoing rising tide of fascism, not just here in the United States, but in many other countries around the world. And based on the election results that we got yesterday, it appears like Italy is the latest country to install a far-right reactionary leader. So I got a great breakdown here from Jake Johnson of Common Dreams telling us a little bit about this candidate, Giorgia Meloni, and then we're going to get into some of her recent statements and speeches, which will give you an idea as to why some people are making the comparison to Benito Mussolini, basically the father of fascism. So let's go ahead and get into some of this article. He says, led by Giorgia Meloni, fascists set to take power in Italy for the first time since Mussolini. So he says, Giorgia Meloni, the leader of the Fascist Brothers of Italy party. Now, this is going to be another interesting component because her party has like deep connected roots with parties that were formed directly after Mussolini was taken out of power after World War II. So the connections here are not just like in their ideology or in their policy prescriptions or in the rhetoric that they use, but also in like the symbolism that this party is using and the coalition that is making up this segment of this electorate here. But he continues saying that the alliance of Meloni's party, as well as Matteo Salvini's The League, and former Prime Minister Silvio Berlusconi, Forza Italia, won roughly 43% of the vote in early tallies, with Brothers of Italy winning around 25% in the low turnout contest. And results counted thus far indicate that the right-wing coalition failed to garner enough support to amend Italy's constitution, but they still, it seems like, do have a plurality control. They say Italy's centrist Democratic Party is poised to lead the opposition, and again, this through line of a fragmented center-left coalition failing to stop fascism. It'll be interesting to see how effective this opposition party is when they have the opportunity to sort of try to nip this in the bud as quickly as possible. But he continues saying that Meloni has rejected the fascist label, but her party has its roots in the neo-fascist movement that emerged following the death of dictator Benito Mussolini. They say Meloni was a youth member of the Italian social movement, which was created by former members of Mussolini's National Fascist Party. And it goes a little bit deeper there, not just within Italy, but also with the United States and other Western countries as well, after World War II, sort of beginning the process of transitioning away from fighting the Nazis and towards fighting communism, right, with the rise of the Soviet Union and the emergence of the Cold War. And one of the things that the United States did via basically the CIA and other agencies that we were working with at the time was to help bolster a lot of these movements and a lot of these political parties that emerged in the wake of the fall of some of these fascist regimes, basically choosing to side with the fascists in an effort to beat back any possible attempt that there would be in a growing socialist or even democratic socialist movement within a lot of these countries. And Italy was one of those countries where the CIA was directly participating in helping to aid the rise of parties and organizations like this to fight the communists and the socialists within Italy. But they continue saying that the Brothers of Italy's fascist heritage can be seen on its flag, which features the tricolor flame that served as the Italian social movement's symbol. So, I mean, again, this would be like basically the equivalent of some, far-right German party straight up using the swastika as their political label. I mean, this tricolor flame has a deep entrenched history with Benito Mussolini and fascist movements generally within this country. But again, they're not even really trying to hide it, while at the same time outright denying that they have any connection to fascism whatsoever. So, I mean, it's pretty apparent what they're doing here, but they continue saying that last month, in an address aimed at distancing herself from her past involvement with fascist organizations, Meloni said that she has, in recent years, had the honor of leading the European Conservative Party, which shares values and experiences with British Tories, the US Republicans, and the Israeli Likud. So this part of it is honestly like true, because I would also consider like the modern Republican Party here in the United States to also be fascist. So, I mean, I guess she's right in that sense that, she does have the honor of sharing values and experiences with Tories and Republicans, as well as the Likud coalition. So, I mean, that part is also, accurate to some extent, but it's not accurate to say that they are not fascists. I mean, really what you're saying here is that all of these different coalitions that you're referring to all have similar fascist characteristics to them. But they continue saying that Ruth Ben-Ghiat, professor of history and Italian studies at New York University, wrote for The Atlantic last week that Meloni's enemies list is familiar: LGBT lobbies that are out to harm woman and the family by destroying gender identity. So again, think of the ongoing attacks here in the United States of Republicans targeting a lot of LGBTQ organizations and groups, as well as portraying teachers as like pedophile groomers, etc. A lot of through lines here between all of these different countries, but they say she also focuses on George Soros, who is an, according to her, international speculator. She said that he finances global mass migration that threatens a great replacement of white native-born Italians. So again, this great replacement theory, I mean, this is not something that is isolated to U.S. fascists. I mean, this is the type of rhetoric that we hear from white nationalist propagandists like Tucker Carlson, constantly talking about how immigration is basically just a giant plot. Of course, they are always going to use George Soros when talking about this because he happens to be a Jewish billionaire, but they're always going to use this rhetoric, no matter which country you're talking about, of ethnic division and trying to imply that any immigration of non-majority population ethnicities is basically just a giant plot to replace the native-born population in order to dilute their power within our so-called democracies, right? I mean, this is the same shit that we hear on a regular basis from Republicans and fascists in this country as well. I think it's also kind of funny that, we're talking about Italy, and they're basically pushing with a similar, like, white nationalist talking point here, or white nationalist rhetoric here, when at the same time, like, if you look at the history of the United States and the racism that has been baked within this country since its founding, we straight up used to not think that Italians were even considered white. So it's like, this arbitrary notion that you are protecting like white identity or like white characteristics as well. It's completely fucking arbitrary. People in the United States didn't even used to consider like Irish people and even German people, who Benjamin Franklin used to refer to as like swarthy and non-white as well, including Italians. They would not have considered them white, and they're obviously turning around and using the same type of rhetoric in whichever country that you happen to be talking about. This time we're talking about Italy, but again, using some of the same arguments that we hear a lot here in the United States. But they continue with a quote saying that Meloni seems unlikely to tone down her extremism or change her alignment with illiberal parties in Europe, such as Hungary's Fidesz, I guess is how you pronounce that, he argued. And after all, pushing hardline anti-immigrant and anti-LGBTQ policies in the name of defending white Christian civilization has worked well for them, like Hungary's authoritarian leader Viktor Orban, who U.S. conservatives are huge fans of as well. And similar to him, Meloni has made a common cause with U.S. Republicans attending the Conservative Political Action Conference and the National Prayer Breakfast, which is something that, again, Orban was also invited to and gave his fascist speech at as well. And I think like people like Bolsonaro have also been invited to give speeches at that. So this is basically just international fascist coalition building that we are seeing in real time here. But they continue saying that Italy has seen 11 governments in 20 years, and Sunday's snap contest came after unelected Prime Minister Mario Draghi, a former central banker, announced his resignation in July following the collapse of his unity government amid a worsening cost of living crisis. And here we get to a good critique here in terms of how I think that neoliberal policies and a neoliberal economic approach often does aid and abet the rise of economic populism or far-right populism within a lot of these countries, because you do have disastrous economic conditions that are put on working class people, no matter what country that you were talking about. And so, of course, there is going to be this, door that is opened for a lot of them, similar to how Donald Trump did here in 2016, who come in and they pretend like we are going to restore the greatness of this country. They tap into a lot of that hardship that people are feeling, and they basically weaponize that and use scapegoats like the LGBTQ community, like immigrants as well, and pretend to be these like economic populists who are going to return jobs to whatever country and revitalize the American working class or the Italian working class, and basically just pretend to represent some people who have legitimately gotten screwed over by the capitalist system, and try to turn them into fascists instead of turning them against the actual economic elites, which is the most ironic part of all of this, which is that these people, conservatives, no matter which country you're talking about, they are the biggest supporters of the elites. I mean, that's what their entire economic platform is. I mean, this is somebody who I would predict is going to be in favor of neoliberal economic policies, even as she is coming out and railing against the status quo and trying to return Italian greatness. But We got a quote here on that saying that for too many years, Italy has been stuck in a cycle, a merry-go-round in which power is passed up between failed career politicians, unelected technocrats, and opportunistic populists, said DIEM25, a pan-European progressive movement co-founded by former Greek finance minister Yanis Varoufakis. And he says one of these populists, an openly fascist one, is now set to become the country's new leader. And he later argued on Monday that the far-right's surge to power in Italy represents another colossal failure by the European establishment and its disastrous economic policies that have worsened inequality for the benefit of the elites. And I think he's 100% right there, because, even here in the United States, what is aiding and abetting the rise of MAGA and aiding and abetting in the rise of Donald Trump-like figures, right? It's because we have had for decades in this country, since like the Reagan era of, the first launch-off point of neoliberal economics in this country, what have we seen? We have seen corporate America export millions and millions of jobs overseas. We have seen people be plunged into a state of despair in this country. We have insane healthcare policies in this country that are bankrupting people at a mass scale. We don't have living wages. We don't have, affordable housing. We don't have any actual material improvements to average people's lives. And so they are going to be looking for people to blame. They are going to be looking for some powerful strong man leader, or in this case, strong woman leader, to step in and to, restore a lot of that, previous glory that they feel. Now, obviously, those are bullshit narratives, and the actual solution to a lot of that economic precarity that people are feeling on a regular basis would be to have, a movement to the left economically, to provide more adequate social safety nets, to provide improvements to people's material conditions so that they don't feel the need to go out and look for strongman leaders, or to, look for somebody who is going to use these scapegoats that we were just talking about. So now with that all being laid out there, I do want to give you a little bit of a glimpse in terms of some of her previous statements and other reasons why people are drawing comparisons to Benito Mussolini, because she has, at least in her past here, this was from when she was pretty young, openly been in favor and praised figures like Benito Mussolini. So let's go ahead and watch this clip here from Bess Marks.
Moi, je crois que Mussolini, c'était un bon politicien. Tout ce qu'il a fait pour l'Italie.
Okay, so there you go. Again, as he's pointing out here, Mussolini was a good politician. Everything he did for Italy. So, she's not even really, I guess she's trying to hide it now, but if you go and look at through her previous statements and some of the organizations that she has been with, it's pretty clear exactly who she is trying to, represent, exactly the type of coalition that she is trying to build here. Now I want to get into another clip that we had where she was giving a speech at one of these conferences, and you're going to see a lot of the reasons why U.S. conservatives are super up in arms and in favor of her winning this recent election. As pointed out here by the person who tweeted this, Greg Price, who is a well-known conservative figure. He says, this is Italy's new prime minister, Giorgia Meloni. I've never heard any politician so perfectly explain what we're up against and why we fight. When you watch this video, you'll quickly realize why the establishment is afraid of her. So clearly, U.S. conservatives are absolutely eating this shit up. So let's go ahead and see what has them, pissing and shitting their pants over the idea that she is now finally in office.
Potrei farne tante altre di queste domande. A monte c'è quella che ci facciamo oggi: perché la famiglia è un nemico? Perché la famiglia fa così paura? C'è una risposta unica per tutte queste domande. Perché ci definisce, perché è la nostra identità. Perché tutto quello che ci definisce in questo tempo è un nemico, per chi vorrebbe che non avessimo più un'identità e che fossimo solamente schiavi, consumatori perfetti. E allora è sotto attacco l'identità nazionale, è sotto attacco l'identità religiosa, è sotto attacco l'identità di genere, è sotto attacco l'identità familiare. Non devo potermi definire italiana, cristiana, donna, madre, no. Io devo essere cittadino X, genere X, genitore 1, genitore 2, devo essere un numero. Perché quando sarò solamente un numero, quando non avrò più un'identità, quando non avrò più radici, allora sarò lo schiavo perfetto in balia della grande speculazione finanziaria, il consumatore perfetto. E questa è la ragione per la quale oggi noi facciamo tanta paura. Questa è la ragione per la quale oggi questo appuntamento fa tanta paura. Perché noi non vogliamo essere dei numeri, noi siamo qui per dire che noi non siamo dei numeri, noi difenderemo il valore della persona umana, di ogni singola persona umana, perché ognuno di noi ha un codice genetico unico e irripetibile. E questo, piaccia o no, ha del sacro. Lo difenderemo Dio, la patria e la famiglia, che fanno tanto schifo a qualcuno. Lo faremo per difendere la nostra libertà, perché noi non saremo mai schiavi e semplici consumatori in balia della speculazione finanziaria. Ecco la nostra missione, ecco perché oggi sono venuta qui. Scriveva Chesterton ormai più di un secolo fa, vediamo se ve lo trovo: fuochi verranno attizzati per dimostrare che 2 più 2 fa 4. Spade verranno sguainate per dimostrare che le foglie sono verdi in estate. Quel tempo è arrivato, signori. Siamo pronti.
Okay, so there you go. I mean, again, I know I was cutting off a little bit there at the bottom, but I mean, you get the basic gist of it, right? It's the same shit that we see from US conservatives. I mean, coming out here, pretending to be a representative of like average people or working class people. And, you know, she's using a lot of that rhetoric, attacking financial elites within the country and even internationally. And obviously she likes to focus on people like George Soros. I wonder if there's any connection between that and the rising of anti-Semitic attacks right now. But I mean, it's just the classic fascist talking points that we're looking at here, attacking the financial elites while actually putting forward a policy agenda that is perfectly in service of perpetuating the power that a lot of these actual financial elites have in whatever country that you're talking about here. I mean, again, it's a perfect through line to the Republican Party in the United States. I mean, Donald Trump, a literal billionaire who has, you know, basically been a complete fraudster his entire life, and, you know, coming out here and pretending like he is going to be the guy who revitalizes the American working class and actually takes on like the DC swamp or takes on corruption. I mean, this is the most corrupt motherfucker that we've ever seen in US politics. He's one of the most perfect embodiments of elitism that we have ever seen in American politics. And it's going to be the same exact goddamn thing with Giorgia Meloni now in Italy. So, I mean, look at what US conservatives are talking about here. Obviously, there is still this ongoing through line that we have seen of sort of an international fascist coalition building between all of these different various countries. We've seen this in Greece. We've seen this in Hungary. We've seen this in France with Marie Le Pen. We've seen this in the UK with Liz Truss and Boris Johnson. Now we're seeing this in Italy, obviously still dealing with this threat here in the United States. So this is not something that is going away. I think that, you know, in terms of where the future of these fascist movements is going to end up, I think could in large part we could see a good indicator with the upcoming elections in Brazil and whether or not Jair Bolsonaro is basically able to facilitate a coup to stay in power when he inevitably loses the election to Lula da Silva. That is going to be a really key inflection point in terms of like which direction we are going globally and whether or not the United States is going to be willing to stand against him should he try something like that. But I mean, we still see this all across the world right now. Obviously, there's been sort of like a reactionary right-wing shift in a lot of these different various countries, and it's something that we can't just gloss over. We are obviously, myself as a socialist, or even if you are somebody who's just a liberal or somebody who identifies as like a progressive or whatever label you want to throw on it, this is going to take a massive coalition in order to push back this tide and to, you know, explain to people what the actual solutions are to the current economic problems that millions and millions of people are legitimately facing right now. We need a movement to the left. We need stronger, empowered labor unions. We need to actually take on the financial elite, the global capitalist class that is dominating our country and other countries around the world, and institute at least social democracy or, you know, push back with actual socialism in whatever country that you want to talk about. I mean, we've seen a little bit of an uplifting tendency in South America with a lot of these recent elections of people like Gabriel Boric and Gustavo Petro and Pedro Castillo, etc. So it does seem like there's sort of a fight that is going on right now at a global scale between these two systems, but you know, we have to stay vigilant, we have to stay aware, and, you know, stay on top of this shit, because this is just Italy for this time. I mean, this is just one person who just got elected, but clearly there is an attempt right now by a lot of fascists around the world in order to build some solidarity movements so that they are going to be the ones who are in power for the foreseeable future. And if we look into the past and we look for guidelines in terms of how this ends up, it is absolutely always going to end up with an unmitigated disaster.
Everyone is saying good politic guy has the best politics. Believe me, no one does it like him. Believe me, everyone is saying